The Battle of Cowpens was a turning point in the American Revolutionary War in the South that would lead to the Battle of Yorktown and end of the war. But how did this battle occur? What events led to the battle taking place? How was it fought? And who fought it? So go ahead, grab a drink and a snack, get comfortable, and relax as I tell you the story, the Battle of Cowpens, this time on the History Inquirer. General Nathanael Greene took command of the Southern Department on December 3rd, 1780, in Charlotte, North Carolina, following the battles of Camden and Kings Mountain, which I previously covered on this channel. If you haven't seen those, then please go and watch them. Now, when Greene was sent by General Washington to take over the Southern Department, he did not go alone. He would bring with him General Daniel Morgan, who was famous for his innovative tactics and experience as captain of a rifle company during the Battle of Saratoga. The Prussian drill master, Baron von Steuben, also went with him, but stayed in Richmond, Virginia to train new recruits. General Greene knew that most of his men were poorly trained, militia, and not regular soldiers, so getting involved in a pitched conventional battle with a better trained, more experienced British army was not ideal unless he was on ground of his own choosing. Thus, he would instead employ Fabian tactics named after Roman general Fabius Maximus to avoid a general engagement with the British army and also harass them when and where he could. Now, he also made the controversial decision to split his forces into one force in the east under Greene's command and one in the west under General Daniel Morgan in order to bolster the militia in those regions and also to better provide for his men due to the scarcity of food. It's easier to from a logistical standpoint, to provide for a smaller army than for a larger one. Now, Cornwallis would divide his force in response and send Bloody Ben Tarleton with a force of 1,200 men northwest up the Broad River after Morgan's force. Now, Morgan responded to the British advance by retreating northward towards the Broad River, which goes north and then curves to the west. Now, he made camp 5 miles south of the Broad River and the border of North Carolina at a place called Hannah's Cowpens, where the battle gets its name. Okay? Now, in the morning, the Americans learned that Tarleton's legion was closing in fast under their position, and with the Americans tired of running and wanting to protect their homes, Morgan and his men decided to stand and fight. Then, too, Morgan knew that if he had crossed the river and potentially gotten a better position, a very defensible position, he would lose part of his force due to part of his force being from South Carolina. So, anyways, so here's the plan, okay? The plan that Morgan settled on was unorthodox and disliked by many of his officers. However, it was a stroke of mad genius, a plan so crazy that it just might work, and in fact, it actually did. So here's the plan, okay? So you have 3 lines of battle. First line made up of 150 skirmishers, these are riflemen, militia, okay? And then a second line of 300 militia under Colonel Andrew Pickens. And then a third line made up of Virginia and Maryland Continental regular soldiers. These are battle-hardened, these are veterans, okay? And then they'd be supported by 120 dragoons and mounted infantry under William Washington, the cousin of George Washington. Okay, and these would be hidden in the woods, kind of behind the main line. And the whole idea is that the militia are unreliable. They're notorious for being unreliable and running before the enemy. So Morgan decides to take advantage of that and to factor that into account and have the militia fire 1, 2, 3 shots. And most sources agree on 2. And then, so the first line would then fire 2 shots and then fall back on the second, fire 2 more shots at least, and then fall back on to the left of the third line to act as a reserve force. And the British, in their arrogance, would think that the Americans were running, they had the enemy on the run, only to fall into the Americans' trap. So in order for Morgan's plan to work, Morgan would count on them to do their part. And he would ask only what he knew that they were capable of doing. The ones on the first and second lines were not expected to hold their position at all costs, but were to stand their ground until the Redcoats were within 50 paces of their line, then fire once, twice, and if possible 3 times at the command of their officers. Then they were to fall back to the second line, but do so in good order. So they're firing 2 or 3 times. Like I said, the first line will fall back and regroup on the second. Then the second would fall back and form up on the left flank of the main line of battle. And before the battle, Morgan would tell his men to target the enemy officers, to look for the epaulets. Okay, this specifically caused disorder and confusion in the British ranks. And that is what they did. One source said that about almost half the enemy officers, the British officers, fell in the first volley. Now, as Charleston's men rushed forward towards the American lines, the Loyalists and Redcoats raised a prodigious yell, whereupon Morgan ordered the American response, "Give them the Indian war whoop." Woo! He shouted. The American skirmishers performed their part to perfection, as did the militiamen, who shot down numerous Redcoats and Loyalists and then exited the battlefield to the left as ordered. The militia curtain rose to reveal an unbroken line of Continental soldiers. Now ensued the most brutal phase of the battle, a musket duel at almost point-blank range, and neither side yielded. The British were overconfident and disorganized. Tarleton sent his Highlanders and cavalry into the American right, but were repulsed and enveloped. The Americans again gave a bayonet charge of their own, capturing 2 small British cannon and forcing the British to flee the field. William Washington even dueled Tarleton himself with a broken saber and was saved by both the sergeant and his servant, who parried an attack and shot the officer with a pistol, respectively. For about 24 miles, Washington's cavalry pursued Tarleton's cavalry and his men before heading back to American lines. The Americans had won the day and given Tarleton's legion a devil of a whipping, in Morgan's words. The British casualties were 110 killed, 229 wounded, and 529 missing or captured. American casualties were 25 killed and 124 wounded. After the battle, Morgan would head north and later retire due to illness. Nevertheless, Morgan was now the hero of the South because he delivered a victory as great as that of Saratoga and shown that militia, used properly, could defeat the best trained British regulars, which no one, not Washington, not Greene, not Knox, not Gates, none of the members of Congress, none of the governors ever imagined possible. And the arrogance of the British, who would believe they were routing the enemy when they were in fact being led into a trap, could be used against them. The Battle of Cowpens is significant not only as a turning point in the Revolutionary War, but also due to the innovative tactics that led to an American victory that are still studied to this day. Now, as for General Cornwallis, he abandoned South Carolina to pursue Morgan's army into North Carolina, where they would link up with Greene's army and fight the Battle of Guilford Courthouse on the road that would eventually lead Cornwallis to Yorktown, Virginia, where he'd be trapped between Washington's army and the French fleets, which will be a topic of my next 2 videos. Thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time on the History Inquirer. Thank you.